Welcome to the Housing Choice Voucher Program Voucher Issuance video. Thank you for attending. As we get started, I need you to go into the chat room and type in your name. This is for attendance purposes only. There are a few rules of conduct. Everybody in the meeting will be muted. We are recording it and will take attendance at the end of the meeting as well as at the beginning. You're required to stay for the entire briefing. The Fort Wayne Housing Authority has a family self-sufficiency program. It is a voluntary program that combines case management, education, job training, and support services to families who want to create positive changes in their lives, move forward with independence from cash subsidies, and it enables you to save money using the FSS Incentive Escrow Program. The purpose of the FSS program is to enable eligible families to receive Housing Choice Voucher Program assistance and public housing assistance, and to achieve economic independence and for the family to be self-sufficient. The FSS coordinators that you can contact if you're interested in this are Angela Harris at extension 7217 or Larissa Williams at extension 7230. The vision of the Fort Wayne Housing Authority is to cultivate vibrant, inclusive neighborhoods throughout Fort Wayne where all residents have safe, quality, affordable housing and a high standard of living built on economic self-sufficiency. Our mission statement is to revitalize the city of Fort Wayne by building and developing safe, quality, and affordable housing options while providing programs to foster community, alleviate poverty, and encourage long-term economic self-sufficiency. If you need a reasonable accommodation to fully participate in the Housing Choice Voucher Program, we ask that you speak with your caseworker or contact myself directly. We're going to be going over the paperwork that you will receive with your voucher. And when that is mailed to you, you will also get complete instructions on how to complete the paperwork. We're going to ask everyone to hold their questions till the end of the meeting. So please have a piece of paper and pencil. You can jot those questions down for yourself. We most likely will answer them throughout the briefing. But if we have not at the end of the briefing, we will have time for questions and answers. This is what the voucher looks like. When you receive your voucher in the mail, you need to check the unit size. And we'll talk about how we establish that unit size later. Also check the dates, the date of the voucher issuance. We want to make sure that is correct. You will need to sign and date the voucher and return a copy to the Housing Authority along with other paperwork. Also in your package, you will receive a family review. Now the top portion you can ignore. A lot of times there's old information in there or information that isn't valid for us at this moment in time. But the bottom portion, starting with your family members, we want to make sure it is accurate. So review the information on the family, date of birth, ages, sex, etc. Make sure all that information is correct. Any asset information that you have and your income information. We want to make sure that is completely accurate at this point, okay? If you have expenses, they would also be listed on there as well. On the back of the family self-sufficiency form, you will need to sign and date that, and you're attesting that that information is correct. So what if something's not right? If we typed in the wrong sex, for instance, for child, I just need you to draw a line only through the information that is erroneous and put in the correct information. Just handwrite it in and then sign and date the reform, and it will come back to us along with all the other forms. One of the forms you're going to sign is the family obligations. Now we're later in the program going to cover these We're going to cover them in great detail. So you will understand them and make sure that you know what your obligations are to participate in the program. You're also going to sign and date this form, and it will be returned to the Housing Authority. There's going to be some other forms in your packet as well. Signing these forms authorizes HUD and the Fort Wayne Housing Authority to request verification of your salary and wages from your current and previous employers. It also allows HUD and the Fort Wayne Housing Authority to request wages and unemployment compensation from the state. HUD may request certain tax return information from the Social Security Administration and the IRS, and we may request information from financial institutions as well. It will be in your packet. You will sign these forms and return them. So you're going to get several items in the mail with the packet. We do ask that you read all of them. The voucher itself, and then the RTA, which is the request for tenancy approval that you will submit for a unit. Once you find one, you and the landlord will complete this packet and return it to us at that time. If you are currently getting Section 8 project-based assistance or are in public housing or some other kind of HUD-assisted program, I need you to listen carefully. You must continue to pay your rent and keep your unit in good condition where you are at. If you stop paying your rent, you will not be issued a voucher for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or if you discontinue after you've received your voucher, then that voucher will be revoked. You must leave your unit in good condition, or your assistance will be denied or terminated in the future. You must inform your manager of when you will move out of your unit. You cannot still be in your public housing unit or project-based unit when you sign the lease for your new unit. The HUD regulations do not allow double subsidy, so you have to come off of one program prior to going on to the other one. You're not considered out of your current unit until you have turned in the keys to your manager. Don't drop them in a drop box unless you notify the manager they are there, okay? You cannot have double subsidy. HUD does not allow it. You must move out of your public housing unit or project-based unit before moving into the tenant-based program with a voucher. So the RTA is several pages long. Once you've selected the unit with your landlord and you both agreed that you're going to live there, then you're going to complete this packet and turn it into the Housing Authority. There are instructions on the front page for submitting that information back to the Housing Authority. You must do this prior to your voucher expiring, okay? That is very important. The landlord will complete most of the packet, but there are places where you need to sign and initial throughout the packet. On the back of this request for tenancy approval page, you do need to sign it, date it, put your present address, phone number, etc. Now, tolling is what happens with your voucher once you submit an RTA. So tolling time basically means the clock stops on your voucher. That voucher is good for 60 days. But if you go in at 30 days and you submit an RTA, that time stops on that voucher, okay? If it takes us 15 days to process that RTA and doing reasonableness and affordability and inspections, at some point 15 days down the road, that unit is not approved or it doesn't pass inspection, etc., then that time that we had the voucher processing, it does not count on your voucher days, okay? You will pick back up at day 31 once we disallow that unit or you decide not to accept that unit. If you have a new landlord, somebody's not participated in the program before, that is wonderful. We always are looking for new landlords, but there is some additional paperwork they need to complete to make sure that we can rent their unit through the tenant-based assistance program. So just let them know that. They can contact Taylor Abden directly, or you can give them the Housing Authority number, and we will be glad to give them the information and get them processed through our approval for being a Housing Choice Voucher landlord. The next part, we're going to discuss how the program works. It is very important information, and it will really affect your success on the program. During this portion of the briefing, please take notes and listen carefully. If you have a question, write it down, and at the end, we will address those questions individually. It most likely will be answered during the portion of the meeting, but if not, we will address them later. The eligibility process contains many steps. The preliminary applications, when you applied for the program, you've been waiting on the waiting list. We have done the final eligibility for you, and now you're at the voucher issuance. The next step will be, once you get your voucher and return the signed items, is to submit a request for tenancy approval for the unit you would like. At that point, we're going to process rent reasonableness and affordability, and then it will be scheduled for an inspection. And then that results in the final approval where you'll be able to move into the unit. The voucher itself is valid for 60 days. Make sure you review it once you receive it. You will get 2 copies. 1 copy you sign and keep for yourself. 1 copy you return with the other documentation to the Housing Authority. The Fort Wayne Housing Authority will grant 1 30-day extension automatically, but your submission for the extension request must be prior to the voucher expiring, okay? So if your voucher expires on January 1st, then you need to submit prior to 12/31 the request in writing for an extension. Do not automatically do that. Maybe 15 days prior to your voucher expiring, put in the request. They will grant an additional extension past that first 30-day one for certain conditions, such as you've had a serious medical condition that affects your ability to search. You've located housing, but the unit cannot be approved due to circumstances beyond your control. And you've made a good 4th effort to locate housing and have been unsuccessful. And in your packet of information, you're going to get a tracking guide that you can keep track of all the places you have called, went to, inquired about, so you can show you have been out looking for units. When choosing a unit, you want to consider several things. There is a booklet in your packet that you will receive about finding a unit, but also you consider the condition of the unit. Is this going to pass our HQ inspection? Is it the kind of condition you want to live in? Is the house, in good repair? What is the cost of the unit? Because obviously there's a cap on the amount of rent that you can pay. What are the utilities? Are all the utilities included? Maybe that's what you're looking for. Or maybe part of the utilities are paid for. Is it gas or electric? It's much more expensive to heat with electric than it is gas, even though it's kind of nice to only have that one bill. Where is it located? Is that where you want to live, that part of town? Is there transportation available? If you don't have your own vehicle, are you close to the bus route? Is it got good employment areas in that part of town for you to find work or be near your current employer? What about the school system? If you have school-age children, that's important. And is there shopping available? How far would you have to go to get to a grocery store, etc. Also in your booklet that you're going to be receiving, there's maps of employment areas, neighborhood assets, and the CityLink bus schedule. Those are subject to change, so you might want to contact CityLink directly or look at their website for current bus routes. When you're searching for a place to live, you can do that a variety of ways. One of the ways is we suggest you go to a website. So there's indianahousingnow.org or gosection8.com. Both of those are free services for you to search for units. They allow landlords to post there as well for no charge or nominal charge. It's a good way to find out what's out there. Of course, there's other internet listings as well. You can search, however, Google it, Brit.com. There's several of them out there, but those we know will list if they accept the housing choice voucher or not. In your packet, you will receive a couple of lists. One of those is a list of apartment complexes that will accept the voucher, and a list of landlords who currently have units available. Of course, those units can go quickly, so maybe they don't have anything open at this particular time, but they do have units that will accept the voucher. They just may not have any available today. There are no longer books at the front desk for obvious reasons, including we're not open to the public at this time. So that is no longer an option, but you can always check the newspaper, internet listings. You can also talk to your friends and neighbors and family members, and maybe they're aware of a place or a particular landlord who is renting units. You need to be careful when you're selecting a unit because there are cons out there. So be careful of Craigslist or any situation where you do not meet somebody in person to view the unit. Always review the unit, visit it, not just the outside of it. Make sure you go in and look at it. You are the one who has to live there, okay? Always read your lease or have somebody read it to you if you cannot do so yourself. Make sure you understand the terms that you're going to be agreeing to. Once you've submitted your RTA to the Housing Authority, we will do calculations to determine if the rent is approved and what your estimated rent portion will be. And we will send you, most likely by mail, but sometimes we do send those out via email. Your family share will be the greater of 30% of your adjusted monthly income, or 10% of your gross monthly income, or the $50 minimum rent, plus any amount that exceeds the rent for the payment standard. Gross amount exceeds the rent of the payment standard. So if your unit is over the payment standard, when you add the utilities and the rent to the owner together, you're always going to have to pay that extra amount, no matter what your income is. Okay, so that's something to be cautious of. When we figure out your adjusted monthly income, there are certain deductions we take into consideration. For children under 18 or adults who are disabled or full-time students, you get a $480 annual deduction for them. If you pay out of pocket for childcare to go to school, work, or look for work, then your out-of-pocket childcare expenses might be excluded from your income as well. If you're disabled or elderly, there's a $400 deduction per year for that. And then out-of-pocket expenses. If you're disabled and you have out-of-pocket expenses, whether it's for medication or other household medical costs, those may be excluded as well. So your total, in figuring your adjusted monthly income, you take your total income minus your deductions from your annual income, and that's your adjusted annual income, divided by 12, and that gives you your adjusted monthly income, okay? So no, that's a little complicated, but it's really not. Just think about what you earn per year. You can kind of consider those deductions and then divide it by 12, and that's your adjusted monthly income. So I want to talk briefly about utility allowance. So utility allowance is not what you actually pay for utilities, nor is it something that comes to you to pay for your utilities. Utility allowance is what is estimated to be for a energy conservative family of your size, that size of unit, what an energy conservative family is estimated to pay, okay? So that's important. The utility allowance is deducted from your rent portion based on the utilities you're responsible to pay for. The smaller of the unit size or the voucher size will be used in determining the utility allowance. If you have a 3-bedroom voucher, but your unit's 2-bedroom, we will use the 2-bedroom utilities. The more utilities you're responsible to pay for, the less your rent portion will be, okay? The utility allowance is based, like I said, on an energy conservative family in that type of unit and size of unit. You're responsible to pay utility bills directly to the utility company. Fort Wayne Housing Authority does not pay your utilities for you. The utility allowance is not a check. If the utility exceed your rent portion, you could qualify for a reimbursement for the difference, okay? So if your tenant portion that you have to pay is $200, but your utilities are $220, then you might receive a $20 check for the utility reimbursement. If you do get a utility reimbursement, that amount is paid directly on your behalf to the utility company. You will not get any kind of check for that. As we go through and do the approval process, at some point you'll be sent the utility information sheet to fill out. Even if you don't get a utility reimbursement to start with, we want to have this on file in case the circumstances change, and then we can just quickly convert that utility reimbursement payment over to the utility company for you. In your packet, you will have utility schedules. This is just a sample. It has the type of unit, which is a single family. There's also multifamily duplexes and high rise and garden type units. And then across the top, you'll see the bedroom size. So you're going to use the smaller of the bedroom size that you are going to get or that your voucher size is for. So if you have a 3-bedroom voucher, but you're getting a 4-bedroom unit, then the 3-bedroom would apply. So on the left is the utility services. So you'll see their heating and the different types of heating. So if you want to try to calculate this yourself, heating, and you have a 2-bedroom unit, heating and it's natural gas, 2-bedroom unit is $22. Cooking natural gas for 2-bedroom is $5. Other electric, that includes your lights and the power to run your refrigerator and TV and phone charger, blow dryer, all that stuff. So all units would have that if you pay the electric bill. So just go through and add up the items that apply to your unit that you are responsible to pay for the size and type of unit, and that will give you an estimate on the utility allowance. Your share, what you're required to pay out of pocket, minus the utility allowance, is what you're going to pay in rent. When we determine the bedroom size, normally there's 2 people per bedroom. That is the basic, okay? Now, there will be additional bedrooms assigned for various reasons. If there is a person of different generations, for instance, even though there's only 2 people in the unit, but it's maybe a mother and a child, and there's more than 10 years difference, there would be an additional bedroom issued for that. People of the opposite sex, other than those adults who have a spousal relationship, will be assigned a different bedroom. Foster children are included in determining the unit size. Live-in aides will generally be provided a separate bedroom. No additional bedrooms are provided for the live-in's family. So if you have a live-in aide who has 2 children, there will be only 1 bedroom size adjustment. Space will be provided for children who are away at school, but who live with the family during school recesses. To qualify for the additional bedroom, the child must be listed as a family member. Space will not be provided for family members who are absent most of the time, such as a member who's away serving in the military. Single person families will be allocated 1 bedroom. Single pregnant households will be allocated 2 bedrooms, only if there's no other children in the household. What does the state payment standard mean? The payment standard is used to calculate the monthly housing and payments for the family. Payment standard is the maximum assistance you can receive towards your rent and utilities. Payment standards will be based on the number of bedrooms or your voucher, or the number of bedrooms in your assisted unit, whichever is smaller. The payment standard is not what we will pay for rent, and the payment standard is not a check. So when you go to choose a unit, you can choose whatever size unit you want. We don't have a decision in that, but we're only going to pay for the smaller of the unit size or the voucher size. So If the unit you're choosing is affordable for your voucher size, that's fine. You can have a 1-bedroom unit voucher, 1-bedroom voucher, and rent a 4-bedroom unit if it is affordable for you. Okay. So here's a couple examples. If you choose a 1-bedroom and you choose, you have a 1-bedroom voucher, you choose a 2-bedroom unit. The unit must be affordable using the 1-bedroom payment standard. Your voucher is a 4-bedroom and you choose a 3-bedroom unit. The unit must be affordable using the 3-bedroom payment standard. In your packet, you will have a list of the payment standards for the city of Fort Wayne. Please note there are different payment standards based upon the zip code that the unit you're going to reside in is. That listing is in your packet. So once we get your RTA submitted, we're going to look at if that unit is rent reasonable. That's our first step. So we're going to compare your unit that you've chosen to other unassisted units in the area. We're going to look at the location, the size, the type, the amenities and facilities that are compared, that are there in that unit you choose, and compare it to other units. We'll accommodate for any differences and come up with an amount that is qualified as rent reasonable for that unit. The rent to the owner plus your utility allowance is your gross rent, okay? So the rent amount is not just what the owner is asking for the unit, it also includes that utility allowance. For instance, maybe the owner is asking $600 for their unit and the utility allowance is $200. That amount is actually $800, okay? Not the $600. So you're looking for the gross rent. If that gross rent is less than or equal to your payment standard, the unit is always affordable for you, okay? So you want to try to get a unit that the gross rent is less than or equal to the payment standard. Anything over that payment standard, you are required to pay, even if your income changes. So if we approve the rent amount for this unit, you will get a letter in the mail saying it's been approved and sent to inspections to be scheduled for an inspection. If the rent's not approved, we're going to send you a copy of the letter we're sending the landlord and asking them to accept a lower rent portion. Sometimes they will, sometimes they will not, okay? If they will not accept the lower rent portion, then you'll get an additional RTA to go out and search for another unit. Also remember that time that we had that unit will not count on your voucher time. That is tolling time. HQS inspections are conducted once we determine if the unit is affordable and rent reasonable for you. Those are scheduled with the landlord. You will not be involved in that process. It's strictly between the landlord and the inspection scheduler and department. Once you turn in your RTA, the time it takes to get an inspection can vary from several days to a few weeks, depending on whether the rent is approved automatically right away, the schedule of the inspections, the landlord's availability, and really when that unit is ready for an inspection. The unit must pass the inspection prior to the effective date of the HAP contract and lease. The HQS inspection assures that the house is safe and meets the minimum HUD requirements. Inspectors not rating cosmetic, size, location, or amenities. You choose the unit. You have to live there, okay? Don't expect the inspector to come and say, well, this, needs touched up, or this carpet is, ugly, you need to change it, because as long as it's not a trip hazard, the inspector is going to pass it. You choose the unit, you have to live there. In your booklet of packet information you're going to get, you'll find a booklet for finding a good place to live. This gives you some guidelines and tips on going out and searching for a unit. Also in your packet, you will have information on lead-based paint. It is important to understand the risk of lead-based paint, especially if you have children in the home. Lead-based paint can harm young children and babies even before they're born, and lead can enter into the body through breathing or swallowing lead dust, etc. Once you're ready for the lease, you need to make sure it includes all of the following: the complete name of the owner and tenant, the complete address of the assisted unit, the beginning date on which the unit will be under lease, and it has to be on or after the inspection pass date, okay? We cannot accept a lease that is dated prior to the inspection pass date. The lease in terms of renewal must be in the lease. The lease must be for at least 1 year, okay? It cannot be shy of a year at all. It must be for at least 1 year. The rent amount must be reflected in the lease, and this has to be the amount that is approved by the housing authority. You cannot have any side agreements. If the landlord has to accept a lesser amount than what they ask for, you cannot pay that difference. Utilities and appliances must be addressed in the lease as well. Who's responsible for paying which utilities, and who provides and maintains the appliances in the unit. The tenancy addendum, which is Part C of the HAP contract, must also be attached to the lease. It rules over the lease and gives you protections. Make sure you read your lease before you sign it. This is a copy of the tenancy addendum. There is a copy in your briefing book that you can read through, be familiar with. The housing assistance contract, the HAP contract, you will receive a letter at your new address to notify you of your rent portions once the HAP contract is finalized. The owner must sign and return HAP contracts to the housing authority promptly, and no payments can be made to the landlord until the HAP contracts are signed and returned to the housing authority. Once we get that HAP contract back from the owner, we will process it, and that will begin the payments to the landlord. After payments begin, you as a participant in the program will have to recertify yearly. You will be required to have inspections. Your housing specialist will change. Your rent portions may change. Your initial term of the lease, your landlord may be requesting a rent increase after that initial lease term. After the initial lease term is up, you can move with permission of the Fort Wayne Housing Authority. Know that the Housing Choice Voucher Program is not an entitlement. It is a privilege. You are not entitled to receive rental assistance. Your success on this program really depends on you. So here are your obligations as a participant in the program. You must supply required information. You must disclose social security numbers and sign consent forms. You must live in your assisted unit. You must allow inspections. And you must have approval from the Fort Wayne Housing Authority before moving. Change reports must be made for members of the household, anybody who moves in or out, and income. Please note, if you want to move an adult into the household, not that you've just given birth to a baby, but you would move somebody else in, that has to have prior approval. You cannot just move anybody into your unit. If you get an eviction notice from your landlord, you must supply a copy to the housing authority. You must maintain tenant supplied appliances and utilities. If you're responsible for it, it must be on. All the information you give to the housing authority has to be true and correct. You must not do these. You cannot own or have an interest in the assisted unit or a family member. You cannot violate your lease. You cannot commit program fraud, bribery, or other corrupt criminal acts. You cannot engage in drug-related or violent activity. You cannot sublease your unit. You cannot receive other rental subsidies. You cannot damage your unit. You cannot rent from relatives. You cannot engage in abuse of alcohol that threatens the health, safety, and right to peaceful enjoyment of the premises by others. So you can be terminated from the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and these are some of the reasons why. You violate those family obligations. You owe money to the Fort Wayne Housing Authority or any other housing authority. You fail to report changes. You engage in or threaten abuse or violent behavior towards FWHA staff. You fail to attend your annual recertification appointments, or do them by mail if that's what we're doing at the time. Uh, you live in an unassisted unit without an active voucher. So you're not either not living in your unit or you move from your unit, but you don't have a voucher to move. You're evicted from the assisted unit. You have no HAP payment for 6 months, or funding is not available. So the no HAP for 6 months means that your income has increased to the point that you are paying your full rent amount, and there's no housing authority assistance payment. That's a good thing. They give you 6 months on the program still. You still have to do all your required things, but it's a cushion. If something happens to that new job down the road, you still can receive assistance again, but that is for a maximum of 6 months. Most common reasons for termination would be the eviction from your current unit, unreported income, unauthorized household members. You can't have anybody live in your household who is not on the voucher and lease. You get your utilities turned off, failure to attend the recertification briefing, failure to be present for inspections, criminal activity of any family household member, threatening or abusive behavior towards staff, and failure to supply required information. If you are terminated from the program at some point in the future, once you become a participant, you are allowed an informal hearing. As an applicant, you are given the right to an informal review, and you are still an applicant until you are under lease and HAP contract, and we are paying your rent. There is a discovery process with informal hearings and reviews, and the family is allowed to have representation. So the program works as such. The money is kind of appropriated, I guess is the proper word, by Congress, and the president then decides whether to approve those appropriations. HUD decides where that general monies go, and they develop regulations and contracts with and monitors housing authorities. Your local housing authority provides assistance to the community within the scopes and guidelines set by HUD and Congress. So once you're in your unit, if there is some maintenance issues that need addressed, this is what we're going to talk about here. So first of all, you need to contact the owner for the repairs and allow a reasonable time for repairs to be made. Okay. So emergency maintenance would be allowing 24 hours, other repairs 30 days. If the owner is unresponsive to you, you may request a complaint inspection in writing by the housing authority. So when you contact your owner, you might want to do a phone call or a text or an email. But if they're unresponsive, then you definitely want to make sure that's in writing. If you just left a message, you want to follow up to make sure they received that message. Okay. What are emergencies? Well, in Indiana, it's going to be no heat in February. You have to be warm. It might be raw sewage or no water or no electricity, major things like that. Other repairs are minor things. They may not seem minor to you, but a drippy faucet is not an emergency situation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about portability. If you lived and have resided in the Fort Wayne jurisdiction when you applied for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, then you are allowed to port. If you do not reside here, did not reside when you applied, you cannot port your voucher. You must lease in Fort Wayne for a minimum of 12 months. Okay. So if you believe you're eligible to port and you would like to take your voucher somewhere else, you can do that to any housing authority in the United States that has a Housing Choice Voucher Program. Once you receive your voucher and have returned all of your paperwork to us, you can reach out to us for a portability request form. that must be completed by you in its entirety and sent back to my attention. Paula Gerritsen. Porting can be a hardship for some people. You want to make sure you know where you're going, why you're going there, that you have a support system, or at least have funds available to stay somewhere for several weeks while you're trying to find a unit in that jurisdiction. Okay. If you port your voucher, it will automatically be given 120 days on the voucher, but no additional time will be given. So 120 days becomes the maximum time for a voucher that is porting. You must know where you're going and what the contact information is for that housing authority. Now you want to make sure you really know where you want to go for a couple of reasons. One is if you want to go maybe to the Atlanta area, there are 8 housing authorities in Atlanta that cover that jurisdiction. So you want to know where you want to live, because if you get your information sent to the wrong housing authority, it may take them a while to figure out, hey, it's not us, it's the neighbor over here where you really want to go. That just wastes the time on your voucher. So do your planning ahead of time, know where you want to go, what jurisdiction that is in, and how you're going to manage while you're looking for a unit in that jurisdiction. Once you exercise your right for portability and provide that information to us, we will send a portability questionnaire to the other housing authority. Once they respond, then we're going to send your file to them. At that point, you will work with them, the other agency, for the rest of the process of finding a unit and leasing up in their jurisdiction. In your booklet is a list of housing authorities in the state of Indiana, if you're interested in going to neighboring housing authorities. The city of Fort Wayne has a Metropolitan Human Relations Commission. If you believe you're a victim of discrimination, they will be the ones who would investigate this. The Fair Housing Act makes it illegal to refuse to rent housing, falsify availability of housing, steer to certain areas, advertise only to preferred groups, refuse to accommodate disabilities, failure to design and construct accessible housing, harass, cohere, intimidate, or interfere with persons exercising their fair housing rights. Instructions for filing a housing discrimination complaint are in your briefing book. Please ask if you have any questions. Metro does free investigations on allegations of discrimination within the city limits in the areas of employment, education, public accommodation, housing, and institutes and conducts educational outreach and other programs intended to promote the equal rights and opportunities of all persons. Who is protected under the fair housing laws? Everyone. If you feel you've been subjected to different terms, excluded or denied housing because of any of these protected classes, you may be a victim of housing discrimination. Race, color, national origin, sex, familial status, handicap or disability, religion. We also have local ordinances that protect against ancestry, sexual orientation, place of birth. Here's the contact information for the Metropolitan Human Relations Commission. And you can also get a fair housing brochure from your housing specialist. Violence Against Women's Act was a law enacted in 2006 that protects individuals who are victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The name of the law is the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA. However, it does protect all family members, including men. If you feel you're a victim of domestic violence, please refer to your handouts in your packet. So we're going to have a question and answer session. And at the end of that, then we will open it up to take questions from you that have not been asked. It's best to ask the questions here. If you're unclear on something, other people may be unclear on it as well. It's much faster for us to answer the same question and to 100 people than get 100 calls asking it on an individual basis. Please do not offer any personal information during this session. Most questions apply to several people and are appropriate to ask in a group session. But if you have a hypothetical what if format, that's fine. However, if you have questions relating to personal situations, please see our representative after the meeting or call us. If you have a question, we're going to ask you to raise your hand. I will call on you one person at a time. During this portion of the briefing, please be courteous of others. So frequently asked questions. Can you move into a unit without our approval? The answer is that is yes. However, all the rent portion will be your responsibility until the unit goes through the process and approved by the Fort Wayne Housing Authority. If for some reason a unit is not approved, you are still legally required to pay the landlord for the full amount of rent for the full amount of the lease term. If you have a question, what do? You're going to look in your briefing workbook. That is the first thing. That is something you should read. It's very important information in there. If you still cannot find the answer, then you may call your housing specialist. Who do you call to schedule your inspection? We will call, rather the inspections department will call the landlord to set up the inspection once the rent is approved. We will not schedule the inspection with you. Please do not call and ask when it is. That's an answer that your landlord will have. How long does it take for an inspection to be scheduled? Once the RTA is submitted, it takes, the time it takes to get to an inspection could vary by several days to a few weeks, depending on whether the rent is approved, our schedules as a housing authority, the landlord's availability, the inspector's availability, and when the unit is actually ready. Please do not call 2 days after the RTA is submitted and ask about the inspection. I would wait at least 2 weeks before you contact your landlord to ask them when the inspection is scheduled for. You will get a letter of your estimated rent portion prior to us sending it to inspection. So if you haven't got that letter, it's not to inspection yet. Is the program an entitlement? No, it's not. Your assistance can be terminated due to lack of funding or failure for you to follow the rules. Do you have to be on the program? No, you can remove yourself at any time from the program. If you no longer want to be on the program, you just need to put it in writing to your housing specialist at the time. Do you get a check for your payment standard amount? No. Please refer to your briefing workbook. The payment standard is not the amount we're going to approve for you, okay? It's a guideline of how much we can go up to for your gross rent. Frequently asked questions, who is your housing specialist? Currently, as an applicant in the program, Gabby McCann is your housing specialist, but she will only be your housing specialist until you are leased. Once you're leased, then your housing specialist will be assigned to a regular specialist. Will calling Fort Wayne Housing Authority get your paperwork done faster? No. The more time we spend answering the phone calls, checking messages, returning calls, the less time we spend processing your paperwork. What do you do if you have changes? Whether that's now during this process or once you're on the program, you must report all changes in writing within 10 days. Changes are not accepted over the phone. I've seen this happen several times. People call, hey, I just need to report change, just start a job. Great, glad you got a job, but you have to report it in writing. Everything must come to the housing authority in writing. Who's responsible for your security deposit? You are. Security deposit is between you and the landlord. The housing authority has no say in that of what they can charge, when they charge, etc. What happens if your rent is determined to be not affordable or not reasonable for the area? Can you pay the difference to the landlord? No, you cannot. that's considered a side agreement and it's considered fraud. You will be grounds for termination of your assistance if you have a side agreement with your landlord. What happens if your voucher expires? If your voucher expires before you find a place to rent under the program, you will forfeit the voucher. You must find a unit prior to your voucher expiring. Can you get an extension on your voucher? You may be allowed an extension under general circumstances beyond your control. Generally, you should find a unit within the 60 days allowed. Be sure to document your housing search in case there's an extension is needed down the road. How do you get an extension on your voucher? You're going to put a request in writing. Again, everything must be in writing. Submit that request to the attention of Gabby McCann. We will automatically grant 130-day extensions beyond that. We're going to be based on extenuating circumstances. Please remember, phone calls do delay the process. Phone calls and emails that are not necessary. We have to go through each one. We have to respond. We have to evaluate each call and email. If we're doing that, we are not processing your application. Thank you for your attention and cooperation. Make sure you return the request for tenancy approval as soon as possible. I'm now going to open it up for questions from individuals. Thank you.